Recently, a new survey from Argus revealed that OPEC Plus oil production declined to 38.29 million barrels per day last month, which is about 1.81 billion barrels per day short of its reduced quota. The 19 OPEC Plus members, subject to the quota, produced 310,000 barrels per day fewer in November when compared to the prior month, but that is still 1.81 million barrels per day short of its quota for the month of November. Now, November's quota was a reduction of 2 million barrels per day of October levels. Non-OPEC members of the OPEC Plus group fared better than the traditional OPEC members, raising the combined output by 460,000 barrels per day. Looking at an 8-month high, most of those increases came from Kazakhstan, which saw 330,000 barrels per day production increase, and Russia's production, which saw an increase of 190,000 barrels per day after starting Sakhalin-1. The production declines were led by Saudi Arabia, which saw its output reduced by 440,000 barrels per day. Overall, non-OPEC members produced by 92,000 barrels per day, while OPEC members, part of the quotas underproduced by 90,000 barrels per day. And so we have Gbolahan Olojede, Executive Director, DMA Advisory and Management Services Limited, on the show this morning to tell us why that is so. Good morning to you, Gbolahan.
Be on the program.
Thank you for joining us. Now, OPEC Plus has been cutting oil production to revive crude prices for a while now, but then that has had little or no impact on the prices. Even according to reports, it has plunged to its lowest in the year. We're talking about $71 to $76 per barrel. What is the rationale behind this fall? Why is it that the prices keep falling despite OPEC Plus's intervention?
Well, it's the price of oil. There are a complex factors that have a play in what determines the price. And one very important one is uncertainty about economic conditions. Irrespective of what OPEC may choose to do, if for whatever reason there are concerns about certain things about the global economy, then the prices might not react as expected to cutting quantity of production. So that may be one of it. If you look around the world, you will see that there are actually reasons for caution. Recently, we saw Japan reach a 40-year all-time high inflationary pressure. We heard of the UK Bank of Reserve or Bank of England talking about the possibility of a recession next year that is going to be long and pervasive across the United Kingdom. So these are some of those concerns that might be fueling what we are seeing, which is the non-responsiveness of the prices to quota cut by OPEC and OPEC Plus.
But then non-OPEC members, according to reports, fared better than the OPEC Plus group. Now, they were able to raise as much as 460,000 barrels per day in terms of production, while the OPEC members were able to just put out about 90,000 barrels per day. Why is there a disparity in terms of production looking at these two groups under OPEC Plus?
Well, that is also another fairly complex issue to determine. It would have been easier if this was coming just from, say, producing countries like Nigeria, Angola, and other African countries. People have said, oh, infrastructure challenges, oh, corruption, and all the rest. But you also have Saudi Arabia in that mix. Mm-hmm. So when you have Saudi Arabia, the problem certainly is most unlikely an infrastructure constraint. It's most unlikely to also be due to corruption issue. There are bookmakers who think that this may even be deliberate on the part of some producers, including Saudi Arabia. There are ways to cut down on production. And one of it, of course, could be to announce a decrease in the quota to members of the OPEC countries. Another one might be OPEC countries themselves, taking a cautionary measure to reduce quantity and see if that can lift up the price. So it's a fairly complex thing that requires that we still continue to watch that space over the next few months to see exactly what is going on and how the market will eventually react in the short term.
Let's look outside of OPEC now. Just last week, the European embargo and G7 price cap on Russian crude came into force. Did that have any impact on crude oil prices? If it does, what are those impacts that you would mention? And of course, would you say it also affected OPEC Plus's production too?
I don't think it has effect on prices. If you put a cap on Russia's production, what you are actually doing is curtailing the maximum output of production into the markets. That's what you're doing. And normally, if you curtail supply, the natural reaction should be an increase in price. But that is not what we have seen in the market. As a matter of fact, most likely the reaction from the Russia end will be, of course, for the formal trade, you obey the limits. But it doesn't mean that Russia will not push oil via some other informal market. The oil market goes beyond the normal trade. There is also some trade that are not captured as part of that limit that Europe is putting on Russia. However, on the Africa side of things, or other OPEC members, right, it is the European curtailment does not affect them. So the question is, so why are their production going down? Will it be a deliberate effort by OPEC members to step down on production, to further put a pressure on price to go up a little bit? We will see how this pan out over the next month.
Well, that is actually a very logical explanation there. But then some people are equally saying that due to the fact that there have been conversations about climate change effects on the ecosystem and all, that the OPEC Plus members are also being deliberate by reducing the quantity of oil being produced so as to reduce environmental disaster. Do you think that is also a plausible or a tenable excuse?
I don't think so. There's a lot of hypocrisy around the fossil fuel issue. One of the countries in Europe last week, started even talking about opening up some coal mines. So what are we talking about here if a European country could be talking about coal in 2022? So the energy needs of the world is going to be a critical driver of how fast we can implement this issue of fossil fuel. If there is not enough energy, or there are energy crises in the world, then the issue of fossil fuel will not drive down production, will not be a good reason to drive down production. Rather, what we're going to see is that oil is seen as a better fossil fuel than coal. So if we are now having a situation in which European countries are thinking of coal, then the discussion around climate issue cannot be an issue for affecting the oil production in the immediate or in the short term. There's too much hypocrisy around this fossil fuel.
So invariably, Gbolahan, are you saying that the future of our countries that still have large deposits of crude is still blue as at this time if the issue of renewable energy and the issues surrounding it are not addressed? Is that what you're saying, if I could infer?
What I'm saying is that we must, of course, continue to be part of the global discussions around climate change and the issues of fossil fuel. But Africa must particularly play the geopolitics correctly and better than we are currently, so that we can be on the table and have a fair footing when discussing fossil fuel issues, and not allow the global community that has developed their own society on fossil fuel to now say Africa should run into energy crisis, should run into revenue crisis because they want to transit the world away from fossil fuel. There is an element of unfairness that could draw African countries and similar other countries that are reliant on fossil fuel into abject poverty So the negotiation must be strong at the table. We're not saying, and we must be part of that discussion, because even here in Africa, we are seeing a large effect of climate change. So we must be part of that discussion. But how does the global community seek to also involve Africa in a way that doesn't impoverish us further? It's a discussion that Africa must continue to have, even as we take steps to also migrate away from fossil.
So invariably, you're saying that that is the focus, or that should be the focus of OPEC Plus in terms of these discussions going on the global stage. If we are going to, most especially Africa, is going to have a leeway in terms of revenue, and of course, being able to channel its energy resources in areas that would not be deficient to the earth or to the universe, as the case may be, but then it's still able to generate a revenue for these African countries. If I could summarize it that way, is that your summation? Correct.
There are several aspects to the fossil. For example, the petrochemicals. The petrochemicals are not injurious to the climate, unlike burning the fuel in itself. So those are some of the transition effects that we're seeing. Gas is better than oil, just that oil is better than coal. So the gas could be used as a transition fuel for countries like Nigeria, and then all of us should be participating in the renewables and migrating away from fossil fuels. But we must be careful about being railroaded into exiting fossil fuel just like that. These countries that we're talking about that are pushing us, the entire Africa probably doesn't even generate enough carbon gas as one country out of them, say America or China. So why is the burden on top of Africa if the generators of these carbon emissions sit in other places? So that's part of the discussion. What I'm saying is that we must continue to have that part of the discussion and not allow it to be a backward kind of thing, while we continue to engage with the world on how we can all participate in having a better environment for generations to come.
Thank you so much, Gbolahan Olojede, for joining the conversation. I believe that this is one critical area that all stakeholders need to look into if we're able to forge, or if we are planning to forge a way forward in terms of what is beneficial, both financially and ecologically. Thank you so much for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, we know that oil production or crude oil sales is one of those things that African countries rely on in terms of revenue generation to fund governments for infrastructural development and all whatnot. But then on the other hand, there's the issue of climate change, fossil fuel, and every other attending issues that affect the ecosystem in terms of the economy and crude oil. Well, let's see what OPEC will be stepping into, or what focus they will be bringing into perspective even as the conversation continues. That is today's edition of Business Edge for this morning, or for today. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Head to our websites, www.newscentral.africa, and equally download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store to see the conversations that we have going on for you there on all spheres of human endeavor. My name is Lekan Onabanjo. See you some other time, and do not forget that at the top of the hour, the news will be coming your way, so do not change the dial.